My name is Cassandra Wilson, but everyone just calls me Cassie. I'm 34 years old, and if you had asked me a month ago what my life looked like, I would have told you it was painfully ordinary. An apartment on the outskirts of Portland, a 10-year-old Corolla that made strange noises whenever it rained, a job as an overworked accountant where my boss took credit for my ideas, and a family that only seemed to remember me when they needed something. That was me, stable, responsible, and quietly tired of holding everyone else's mess together while trying not to drown in my own. Then came Tuesday, a Tuesday that split my life into two parts before and after. I had stopped at Gus's Corner Market just like I did every Friday to buy my weekly lottery tickets. It was my birthday, and maybe out of superstition, maybe out of rebellion, I handed Gus a 20 instead of my usual 10. "Birthday splurge," I said with a tired laugh. I picked numbers that meant something to me: my birth date, my parents' birthdays, my Aunt Martha's, and Charlotte's, my best friend. It was a tiny ritual of hope, a way to remind myself that luck wasn't always something that happened to other people. That night, with Thai takeout on the coffee table and a half-empty bottle of wine Charlotte had given me, I sat on my couch scrolling through other people's photos, friends at rooftop parties, family dinners. I hadn't been invited to Lisa's perfect children in matching outfits. I barely noticed when the clock hit 8. The numbers didn't matter, they never did. Until suddenly they did. One by one, the screen showed every single number I had chosen. My numbers. I thought I was hallucinating. I checked my phone, the TV, the website. 6 matching numbers. $47 million. I dropped the remote and just stared at the ceiling, my heart beating so hard it hurt. In that moment, everything I thought I knew about myself fractured. The next morning, after no sleep, I did what I always do. When I feel the ground shifting beneath me, I researched. Article after article warned about lottery winners ruined by their own families, by greed, by sudden fame. And the more I read, the more one truth hardened inside me I couldn't tell anyone. Not my parents, not my brother Jason, who treated borrowing money like an Olympic sport. Not Lisa, who still hadn't paid me back for her wedding. Not even Charlotte, the one person I trusted most. It had to be my secret. Within days, I sat in the office of a lawyer, the winning ticket tucked in my purse like a live grenade. His name was Philip, and he calmly explained how to set up a blind trust, how to shield my identity, how to make sure the money didn't vanish into someone else's hands. I nodded through it all, my mind racing between terror and giddy disbelief. By the end of that meeting, I wasn't just Cassie, the tired accountant, anymore. I was Cassie, the multimillionaire no one could know about. But here's the thing, no one tells you secrets grow heavy. Every day I carried that weight to work, where Arnold still dismissed me, where Derek still slipped out early, where no one had a clue that the woman poring over spreadsheets had more money than all of them combined. At night, I lay awake imagining what my family would do if they found out. Would they celebrate me? Or would they see me as a walking ATM like they always had? I thought about the times I had drained my savings for Jason, only to discover he'd lied about rehab. The $2,000 I had put on my credit card for Lisa's wedding, a debt she still pretended didn't exist. The time I helped my father repair the roof, only to see him posting photos from Cancun weeks later. Betrayals stacked up like stones on my chest. And that's when the idea came to me. If money revealed people's true nature, maybe I didn't have to wait for them to discover mine. Maybe I could test them first. What would they do if I told them I was in trouble, if I needed them the way they had always needed me? Would anyone reach back? Charlotte was the only one I told about this plan. Her brow furrowed in disapproval as we sat on my balcony with wine. "Cassie, that's manipulative," she said softly. "You'll only hurt yourself." Maybe I admitted, but I need to know, I'm tired of wondering. And so I crafted my story. The marketing firm had suddenly collapsed because of an embezzling CEO, leaving me jobless and without a paycheck. My emergency fund had been wiped out by medical tests. I needed $5,000 to get by. Not forever, just until I could find a new job. It was believable, not too dramatic, and enough to show me who cared. The next morning, I dialed my mother first. My hands shook as I told her the story, my voice trembling. She gasped, fussed, and asked about unemployment. But when I asked for help, she faltered. "You know, Warren and I just bought the lake house." I'll talk to him, but I can't promise anything. The pause said everything. Later, I sat across from my father at a cafe. He folded his arms and lectured me about financial responsibility, about how I should have saved 6 months of expenses. Not once did he offer help. When I asked directly, he patted my hand and said, "Sometimes we need to hit rock bottom to learn." Lisa listened in her marble kitchen, sympathy dripping from her lips until I mentioned the number. Then her face tightened. "Paul handles the finances. Maybe a smaller amount, or you could move in with us for a while." Her eyes darted away ashamed. Jason didn't even bother. He sent one text: "That sucks, sis. Tight myself, call you later." He never did. Stephanie told me to downsize my life. Warren said plainly, "You're not my daughter. Your problems aren't mine." Aunt Heather sniffed and told everyone I was irresponsible. Cousin Ryan promised, but never followed through. By the end of that week, I felt hollow. Everyone I had once sacrificed for had turned their backs on me. Everyone but one. Aunt Martha. She called me before I could call her. Her voice was warm, urgent, filled with concern. "Cassie, honey," I heard. "Are you okay?" The next day, she slid an envelope across a diner table. $3,000, nearly all she had. "Family helps family," she whispered, her hand warm over mine. And for the first time since those numbers had appeared on the screen, I cried. I sat across from Martha in that tiny diner, the envelope of cash sitting between us like it weighed 100 pounds. My throat tightened, and for a moment I couldn't speak. She had so little, yet she gave without hesitation, without conditions. My own mother had chosen a lake house over me. My sister had chosen an Audi. My father had chosen his lectures. But Martha had chosen me. When I tried to refuse, she simply pushed the envelope closer. "Don't argue, sweetheart. It's not much, but it'll help. And if you need a place to stay, my sofa folds out into a bed. It's yours as long as you need it." The tears that burned my eyes weren't part of any performance. They were real. For the first time in weeks, I felt like someone saw me as more than a responsibility or a nuisance. That night, I couldn't sleep. The envelope sat on my kitchen table, its edges sharp under the lamplight, daring me to admit what I had done. I had tested them all. I had manipulated the people closest to me. But hadn't they already shown me who they were? The guilt tangled with the relief until I couldn't breathe. The next day, I invited Martha over for dinner. My apartment was small, my furniture worn, but she settled onto my couch like it was the coziest spot in the world. As I poured her tea, I knew I couldn't keep lying. "Martha," I said softly, my hands trembling as I set the cup down. "I need to tell you the truth. I didn't lose my job. The company is fine. I made it up to see who would help me if I needed it." Her eyebrows lifted, but her face didn't harden. She stayed calm, curious, almost resigned. "I see," she murmured. "Are you angry?" I whispered, terrified that I had just destroyed the only real bond I had left. She shook her head slowly. "Not angry. Sad, maybe. Sad that you felt you had to test people this way. But I understand. Our family hasn't always been kind to you." I swallowed hard. "You were the only one, Martha. The only one who offered to help." She sighed and looked down at her tea. "People show you who they are when giving becomes inconvenient, Cassie. I learned that lesson a long time ago." "What do you mean?" I asked, leaning forward. Her eyes softened as if she were peeling back a secret she'd carried for years. "Do you know why I divorced Robert?" I shook my head. "The family always said they grew apart. That's the story we told to keep things neat. The truth, my grandmother left me a small inheritance, not much, $50,000. Robert wanted to invest it in some restaurant scheme his friend dreamed up. I wanted to save it for a house. One day, I found out he had forged my signature and drained the account. It was gone. When I confronted him, he said it was our money, not mine, as if my name meant nothing." I stared at her, stunned. I had no idea. Of course not. Families prefer tidy stories. But that betrayal taught me something. Some people see you as a resource, not as a person. Her words pierced me. I had spent my entire life as a resource, the one who bailed out Jason, who paid for Lisa's wedding, who patched my father's roof. I had never stopped to ask if anyone saw me, really saw me. My hands shook as I reached for hers. "Martha, there's more. Something bigger." Her eyes searched mine, patient. "I didn't just make up a story about losing my job," I confessed. 3 weeks ago, I won the lottery. $47 million. Her breath caught her hand tightening over mine, but she didn't gasp or shriek or demand anything. She just looked at me steady and kind. That's life-changing. I haven't told anyone. Not Mom, not Dad, not Lisa or Jason, not even Charlotte. You're the first. Her eyes glistened. Oh, Cassie. I rushed to explain. I didn't want to ruin things. I needed to know who would stand by me without knowing. And now I know. You gave me nearly all you had, even with your medical bills, even when you didn't have much to spare. You gave it without hesitation. I don't know how to thank you. Martha shook her head gently. Sweetheart, I don't need thanks. I don't need anything from you. I'm happy with my life. My apartment may be small, but it's filled with books and love. My car may rattle, but it gets me where I need to go. What matters is knowing you're safe, that you're happy. That's enough for me. Her selflessness undid me. Here was the only person who had stepped up when she thought I was drowning, and now that she knew I was rich beyond imagination, she wanted nothing. Later that night, as I lay in bed, I scrolled through texts from the rest of my family. My mother accusing me of playing everyone against each other. My father calling me irresponsible. My sister avoiding my calls. Gossip, judgment, excuses, nothing more. And then there was Martha's voice in my memory, soft but unwavering. Money doesn't just reveal who others are, Cassie. It reveals who we are too. The next morning I met with Philip again. I told him I wanted to set up a trust for Martha, one that would cover her medical bills and give her a comfortable retirement. But it has to feel like a gift, I said firmly. She's proud. She won't accept charity. He nodded. We can make it a family trust. Monthly stipends, manageable amounts. She'll never have to worry again. For the first time since the win, I felt like I could breathe. Maybe this fortune didn't have to destroy me. Maybe it could finally heal the places my family had broken. But even as I made plans, I knew a reckoning was coming. The family had already turned my small lie into gossip. If I wanted peace, I'd have to face them all at once. And for the first time in my life, I was ready. By the time Sunday came, I had rehearsed 100 different ways it might unfold. Maybe they'd scream, maybe they'd sulk, maybe they'd play the wounded victims as if my disappointment in them were the real betrayal. Whatever happened, I knew this gathering would not end with hugs and forgiveness. It would end with clarity. I invited them all to my apartment. Every seat in my small living room was filled, my mother and Warren looking vaguely annoyed to be in such modest surroundings. My father and Stephanie whispering judgments under their breath. Lisa, her designer handbag perched carefully on her lap like a shield. Jason pretending to scroll his phone but clearly anxious. And Aunt Heather, who already had a frown carved into her face. Even Ryan came, though he looked like he'd rather be at the casino. Martha arrived last, slipping in with her quiet grace. She gave me a small, secret smile as she sat down, her presence, the only comfort in a room brimming with unspoken tension. I stood, my palms damp, my heart steady in a way I had never felt before. Thank you all for coming. I know there have been rumors about me lately, and I want to set the record straight. My mother shifted in her seat, crossing her arms. My father leaned back, his face already set in the stern expression of a teacher ready to scold a wayward student. The truth is, I continued, I'm fine. I've found a new job, one with better pay and benefits. I'll be transitioning soon. That part was technically true. My nonprofit had just been registered and I had given myself a modest salary. Relief rippled across the room. My mother let out a breath she must have been holding. Lisa smiled, though it didn't reach her eyes. They had come expecting another plea, another burden to shoulder. Instead, they got a reprieve. Well, that's wonderful, my mother said quickly, her voice dripping with practiced cheer. We've all been so worried. I studied her carefully. Worried she hadn't called once after our last conversation. Her worry had been nothing more than polite words in public, empty silence in private. So why all the drama, my father asked sharply. Why ask us for help if you knew you had something lined up? I met his gaze, refusing to shrink the way I always had. Because in that moment, I didn't have anything lined up. I was scared. I thought family was the place you went when you had nowhere else to turn. The silence that followed was deafening. Stephanie was the first to break it. It's not always possible to help Cassandra. We all have our own responsibilities, our own financial obligations. It doesn't mean we don't care. I nodded slowly. Of course, we all make choices about our priorities. Then I turned to Jason. But I have to ask Jason, why didn't you even call me back? A text would have been free. His face flushed. He shoved his phone deeper into his pocket. I was going through stuff. I didn't have anything to give you. You didn't have to give me money, I said, my voice trembling but firm. You could have given me your voice. But you didn't. And that said more than money ever could. Lisa fidgeted in her chair. Cassie, it's not fair to put us on the spot like this. We all love you. We couldn't help right then. It doesn't mean we don't care, doesn't it? I asked softly. Because when Paul wanted a new Audi, you managed it. When the bathroom needed redoing, you managed it. But when your sister said she couldn't pay rent, suddenly, there wasn't room in the budget. Her cheeks went pink. Paul wasn't even in the room, but somehow his absence made her look smaller, as if she didn't know how to defend herself without him. Aunt Heather let out a sharp laugh. Honestly, Cassandra, this little performance is beneath you. You've always been dramatic. Asking everyone for money, stirring up pity, it was manipulative. And now you're scolding us for not falling for it. Her words landed like poison in the room. I felt the familiar sting, the one that used to silence me. But this time, I pushed back. You're right, I said evenly. It was manipulative. I shouldn't have had to do it. But I did it because I needed to know the truth. And the truth is, when I asked for help, every single one of you either refused, deflected, or ignored me. Except one. I turned toward Martha. Her eyes softened, but she stayed quiet, letting the moment belong to me. She gave me almost everything she had, I continued. Not because she expected something back, but because she loves me. That's what family is supposed to mean. The room bristled with discomfort. No one wanted to look at Martha. No one wanted to face what their selfishness had revealed. My father cleared his throat. Well, we can't all afford to give recklessly. Martha's decision was hers, but— No, Dad, I interrupted. You don't get to spin this into a lecture. You don't get to call it reckless when it was compassion. You've all taken from me over the years money, time, patience. And when I needed the same, you turned your backs. That's the truth. And I won't pretend otherwise anymore. The air grew heavy, faces hardened, excuses buzzed on their lips, but no one spoke. They couldn't not without proving my point further. Finally, my mother stood, smoothing her blouse. Well, I'm glad you found your way, Cassie. That's all that matters. Her words were hollow, brittle. She wanted to end this before it cracked the fragile facade we all lived under. One by one they filed out, some muttering defensively, some in silence, none offering an apology. When the door closed behind the last of them, I sank onto the couch, trembling. For the first time in my life, I had faced them all and told the truth. I hadn't revealed my secret, but I had reclaimed something far more precious, my voice. Martha touched my shoulder gently. You did well, sweetheart. That wasn't easy. I looked at her, my chest tight with gratitude. It was easier than I thought. Because for once, I wasn't afraid of losing them. I realized I never really had them to begin with. Martha smiled, her eyes full of pride. That's a powerful thing to learn. And in that moment, I knew everything was about to change. The day after that confrontation, I woke up lighter than I had in years. My family hadn't changed, but I had. Their silence, their excuses, their absence, it had hurt, yes. But standing in front of them, saying what I had swallowed for decades, gave me a strange kind of freedom. I didn't need their approval anymore. That morning, I drove downtown to meet Philip, my lawyer. The city buzzed around me, people rushing to jobs they hated, lives they endured. For once, I wasn't one of them. I sat across from him in his polished office sunlight, reflecting off glass towers, and said the words that would set the course for my future. I want to create something that matters, not just for me, for people like Martha, people who give everything and get nothing in return, people forgotten, left alone. Philip's eyebrows rose, but then he smiled. A foundation, yes, a nonprofit. We'll help elderly people who live alone, who are struggling financially or emotionally. Home repairs, companionship, medical expenses, things that seem small but mean survival. As he scribbled notes, I felt the first spark of something I hadn't felt in years: purpose. Money was no longer about bills or debts or guilt. It was about possibility. The first step was Martha. I told Philip to set up a trust for her medical expenses, a monthly stipend that would let her retire without fear. I also asked him to help me buy her a small house, Nothing extravagant, just comfortable, safe, and close to wherever I would live. She gave me everything when she thought I had nothing. I said quietly, "Now I want to make sure she never has to worry again." The following weeks blurred together in a whirl of decisions and plans. I gave notice at the accounting firm, savoring the look of surprise on Arnold's face when I told him I was leaving. He tried to protest, mumbling about loyalty, but I smiled and walked out without looking back. I wasn't anyone's doormat anymore. Charlotte was the next person I told. When the words left my mouth, "I won the lottery," her jaw dropped, her glass of wine halfway to her lips. For a moment she just stared. Then she laughed a laugh that turned into tears. "Cassie, oh my God. You've been carrying this alone all this time." I nodded, shame and relief tangled inside me. "I didn't want to lose you. I didn't want money to change us." Her hand squeezed mine, firm and steady. "Nothing could change us. You're stuck with me, millionaire or not." It was Charlotte who eventually joined me in the nonprofit. With her nursing background, she became our outreach coordinator, her compassion filling the gaps I couldn't. Together with Martha's wisdom guiding us, we built something that grew faster than I ever dreamed. But before any of that could take root, I had to face one last test, another family gathering. Not because I owed them anything, but because I needed closure. I invited them again under the guise of an important announcement. When they arrived, suspicious and restless, I told them simply, "I'm fine. I've started a new job and I won't need to ask for help anymore. I just wanted you to know." Relief washed over their faces. Relief not for me, but for themselves. They hadn't come to support me. They'd come to see what it might cost them. My father tried to turn it into another lecture about financial responsibility. Stephanie muttered about boundaries. Heather smirked as if she'd been proven right all along. Jason avoided my eyes. Lisa offered a brittle smile, already checking her phone for messages from Paul. I didn't tell them about the winnings. I didn't tell them about the trust or the foundation. I gave them nothing but polite words and a boundary they didn't even know they had crossed. And as they filed out, muttering, justifying, pretending, I felt the chapter close. When the door shut behind the last of them, I turned to Martha. She had stayed, of course. She always did. We cleaned up the coffee cups together in silence until finally she said, "You did well, Cassie. That couldn't have been easy." It was easier than I thought, I admitted, because for the first time I wasn't afraid of losing them. I realized I never really had them to begin with. Her smile was soft, proud. "That's the lesson, isn't it? Sometimes you have to see the truth to set yourself free." Over the next year, my life reshaped itself into something unrecognizable. I bought a modest house with a garden that caught the morning light just right. 3 blocks away, Martha moved into her own small craftsman home, wide doorways for the days her diabetes made walking hard, shelves for her endless books. I watched her health improve with proper care, her laughter returning with the weight of financial worry gone. Our nonprofit grew beyond my expectations. We fixed broken steps for elderly widows, paid for hearing aids, provided volunteers who simply sat and listened. We became a lifeline for people who had no one else. Every time someone thanked us with tears in their eyes, I thought of Martha in that diner sliding that envelope across the table. That moment had planted the seed for everything that followed. Meanwhile, my family remained distant. We spoke on birthdays, exchanged shallow pleasantries at holidays. They never knew the truth. They assumed I had landed on my feet in nonprofit work, and I let them. Their ignorance became my shield, protecting the fragile peace I had built. But sometimes when Jason called asking for money for a new business idea, or when Lisa complained about tuition costs, temptation whispered, "Wouldn't it be satisfying to tell them the truth, to let them see what they had thrown away?" Each time I remembered the silence when I had needed them most, and I chose not to. Instead, when true need arose, when my father had a heart attack and couldn't pay the medical bills, or when Ryan finally entered rehab, I helped anonymously, quietly, without recognition. They never knew, and I preferred it that way. Because money wasn't my revenge, my life was. A year after those numbers had changed my life, I sat on the porch of Martha's new home. The evening air was warm, the sky painted in strokes of pink and gold as the sun slipped behind the trees. She sipped her tea, her silver hair glowing in the fading light, and I felt a quiet peace settle over me. You know what amazes me? She said softly. How differently this could have gone. If you had announced your win right away, the whole family would have swarmed you. I nodded, watching the horizon. They would have become suddenly loving, suddenly attentive, and I would have never known what was real. That knowledge, Martha said, her voice steady, as painful as it was, gave you freedom. She was right. The test had been brutal, manipulative even, but it had shown me the truth. The people who had taken and taken from me when I had so little could not find it in their hearts to give me even a fraction of compassion. And the one person who had almost nothing had given me nearly everything. The money didn't change who anyone was. It revealed who they had been all along. I thought back to all the years I had defined myself by sacrifice. The dutiful daughter who lent money she couldn't afford. The sister who covered wedding costs that never got repaid. The daughter who patched her father's roof while he vacationed on sandy beaches. I had thought love was measured by what I could give, as though generosity could buy me belonging. But Martha taught me something different. Real love doesn't keep a balance sheet. It gives freely, yes, but it also respects dignity and boundaries. It doesn't vanish when you can't offer anything in return. That lesson carried me through as our nonprofit blossomed. We weren't just handing out money, we were restoring dignity to people who had been forgotten, lonely widows, with no one to call, elderly men whose homes had crumbled around them, women who had sacrificed their lives for families who no longer visited. Each time we showed up, each time we listened, I felt like I was giving back in a way that mattered. Charlotte became my anchor through it all. She still came over for wine nights, though now we sat on my patio, instead of my cramped apartment balcony. She teased me about being the eccentric millionaire who still clipped coupons out of habit, and I laughed because she wasn't wrong. Money hadn't changed who I was. It had only stripped away the desperation, the need for approval that had once chained me. My family remained on the periphery of my life. Holidays came and went with polite calls and hollow conversations. They never asked too many questions about how I had rebuilt so quickly. Perhaps they didn't want to know, or perhaps they assumed I had finally learned responsibility. Either way, their ignorance became my protection. There were moments of temptation, of course. When Lisa complained about the cost of remodeling her kitchen, I wanted to tell her I could buy 10 kitchens without blinking. When Jason begged for a loan for a new business idea, I wanted to laugh in his face and remind him of the silence when I needed him, but each time I bit my tongue. Because revenge wasn't my path. I didn't need to prove anything. Instead, I helped from the shadows. I paid my father's hospital bills anonymously after his heart attack. I covered Ryan's rehab costs through a donation fund. They never knew. And I preferred it that way. Because if they couldn't offer me love without knowing I was rich, then I didn't want their gratitude for my money either. Sitting with Martha that evening, I realized the greatest gift the lottery had given me wasn't security or comfort, it was clarity. It forced me to see my family for who they were and myself for who I had been. It gave me the strength to draw boundaries, to build a life rooted not in desperation, but in purpose. And most of all, it showed me that the people who deserve a place in your life are not the ones who show up when you have everything to give. They are the ones who stay when you have nothing but yourself. I looked over at Martha, her eyes soft with wisdom, and whispered, "You did good, you know. You taught me what family really means." She reached for my hand, her palm warm and steady. "And you, Cassie," she said, her smile breaking through the fading dusk, "you finally learned to choose yourself." The sky deepened, stars beginning to pierce the twilight. I thought of that night when the numbers had appeared on the screen, the terror and disbelief that had swallowed me whole. I thought of the betrayals, the silence, the gossip. And then I thought of this, of Martha's porch, of the foundation we had built, of the peace I now carried. The money had changed my life, yes, but not in the way people might think. It hadn't made me rich, it had made me free. Have you ever had to test someone's loyalty? Did you ever learn the hard way who was really there for you? Share your story in the comments. I want to hear it. And if this journey resonated with you, if you saw pieces of your own life reflected in mine, please like, share, and subscribe. It helps more than you know, and it might bring these lessons to someone who needs them right now. Remember this: your worth isn't measured by what you can give to others. The people who love you will stay even when you have nothing to offer but yourself.